Record. All right, for all those that will watch later, this call was set up in such a way that I could try and disseminate some of the knowledge and discuss things that I had from the last couple weeks of travel. Helm Summit, Kubernetes Community Day, and GitLab Commit. So let's do a quick rundown on what actually happened with Helm Summit. It was held in Amsterdam. It was a 2-day event. Total attendance was around 150 to 200-ish, depending on how many bodies you particularly count. There was a strong presence from the major cloud providers. We did not see AWS there, which was odd, but I did see Microsoft, Red Hat, IBM, Google, and a couple of our partners such as BitNami, all being major players in providing speakers and training content. It was actually nice seeing the BitNami team. There was the large contingent. When I say large contingent, I mean 5 of their developers were present. I had some time to talk to them off and on about what they're doing, what we're doing, and how we can work together. But the couple of key things I want to point out is that they have a MinIO chart that they're looking to bring to replace the mainstream one. This actually is the beginnings of their incorporations of our patterns, such as check config. I've linked in the notes their usage of them. They're not as complex as ours, but they're beginning to roll them into all of their charts over time to try and catch these oopsies in configuration. This is one particular example of us starting to actually have a viable impact throughout the larger ecosystem, especially when dealing with complex things. Most people, oh, well, you managed to break it. Okay, let's figure out what you broke. We're proactively attempting to keep people from shooting themselves in the foot by just setting a bad option by accident. And it's not that can't still do that. There are edge cases, as we've seen. However, let's try not to break that too often. They also actually were a little dismayed that we started the work towards Patroni because they were in the middle of introducing Rep Manager to do a PostgreSQL HA. So they're like, that's one piece that we won't specifically be able to work with when they do have it ready. They're also very glad to hear that we're beginning the migration work to the new charts. They also, all of their developers and specifically their leads are 100% on board with us trying to push these things as new standard practices and do them as we've outlined because we've shown them as viable throughout our users in our particular case. I got to see a couple of talks from Red Hat revolving around the operator and the operator lifecycle manager. This is a particular interest because this could replace or at least be the beginnings of what we need for the 2-phase operator that we have an open proposal for. Myself, DJ, Hussein had a call the other week when I got back specifically to talk about this and other things that we need to look at in how we're going to actually do the operator going forward. We have some notes from that call and we'll be doing work around that in the future. Effectively, one of the things we're looking to do is unify everything to a single CRD, but have that CRD actually live outside of the chart and have the operator live outside of the chart, but then consume the chart. By the way, at any point, if anybody's here and wants to interrupt me, please feel free. Microsoft had a presentation that actually spoke about doing pre-release checks, CI testing and things like this. CubeVal is one of the ones that they also brought up. We've unfortunately never been able to implement it, but we had a community member give us an example. What was that, DJ, like a year ago?
Yeah,
so I'd really love to do that.
Yeah, and by we haven't been able to, it means we haven't been able to get the time to try it. Yes.
Right. It's not that we have not been functionally able to, it's that we have not had the literal schedulable person power to go do the work. And that's just the nature of us trying to keep up with the entirety of now 900 plus employees doing all of the work behind us that then we have to make sure gets out to the world. It's kind of time constraints. Woo! Let's see.
Well, just one more note on that. When we looked at it a year ago, I'm trying to understand like what drew us to look at it a year ago. And do we still have the sort of the same problems that we're trying to solve with it?
Okay, so CubeVal is an interesting piece. There's some other things involved with everything going on, but effectively, it's a way for you to actually do evaluation on the outputted Kubernetes YAML from a Helm template. You can actually ensure that everything is fully valid and valid against a specific version of Kubernetes to which you're trying to deploy. There's a number of things that you can do with it, but it would allow us to do validation on our output based on our target.
Gotcha. That was the piece. I guess I'm not familiar with this tool, so that's why I was.
Yeah, it lets you very quickly like specify which version of Kubernetes you're validating against, and then validates your output against that quite quickly. So we would be able to, like currently our CI and our tests are only running one version of Kubernetes, but with CubeVal we could still be validating that our templates use APIs that are supported and
across multiple.
Yeah, across all of our supported Kubernetes versions.
Gotcha.
Right, and we've discussed trying to figure out how to do multiple versions of Kubernetes for this testing, like actual deploy it into it using things like Kind or K3s and Docker or many other variations. CubeVal does not do that, but instead actually does the validation on the output to make sure that it would actually pass the API constraints.
Gotcha.
And this is done through the use of JSON schemas. So I don't want to get too far into those details. We can
that's fine.
do that further in exploration in the future.
One quick wrap up. How many current versions of Kubernetes do we typically support, like concurrently?
We target roughly plus 1 minus 2. Now, officially speaking, Kubernetes is plus 1 minus 1 on API versions. The reality is that API sets that we try to use are the long-term ones or late betas rather than anything alpha. We just steer away from alpha because you never know what's going to happen. Right now, 1.16 is out, and we have now made the changes to our chart. I merged them yesterday. However, there are further upstream charts that we actually have to wait on their changes to come through. Grafana, Prometheus, I think just hasn't opened PR for it. We traditionally try to go actually a few versions back. While they say they support 3 versions, so 1.16, they now support 1.16, 1.15, 1.14. 1.13 is dangling around here, and we are currently supporting back to 1.12 because 1.12 is the implementation of the APIs that we make use of. We previously had, okay, it should work all the way back to 1.8. We bumped that to 1.10, and we're going to 1.12. And shortly, because 1.16 is now out, we'll have to make that bump to 1.14 because we're staying at as far back as we can within the tool sets, because we understand that some customers can't keep up with the revisioning of Kubernetes itself.
Yeah, we've been typically following the cloud providers for guidance. So basically, when GKE and EKS still have support for a version, we've typically kept support for that version until they expire.
Gotcha. That makes sense too.
Right. Because if our customers are going to deploy multi-cloud, they have to actually be able to deploy into the clouds. Because, hey, even if there's 15 vendors, if only 5 of them actually accept the version of YAML we output.
Understood. Thanks for all that great context around on the versions. Again, for folks watching this, I think that part of it in particular is probably a question out there for folks that don't work with it every day at GitLab.
Yeah, this is something that DJ and I have seen over the life of this project, me especially. Kubernetes really has evolved at a high pace, right? So if you think they go fast, we go faster by a long shot. But every quarter out comes a new version, and they're only basically supporting 9 months. That's how fast the platform is evolving, right? So we started this 2 years ago. We have now seen, we started in late 1.7, early 1.8. We're on 1.16, right? This is how far we've come. And there's huge changes that have happened in the underlying behaviors. But we have to try and smooth all of that out, right, for our customers, because maybe they've just gotten 110 deployed, 116 comes out. We can't just be like, plunk, you need to go a year in advance before you can deploy us, right? We have to be a little more careful about our selection of which APIs we make use of and the particular version features available in those APIs, because some cloud providers don't have them, some on-prems do. Maybe it doesn't really work that well until you get 2 versions later. These are things we have to worry about. It's not like AWS or GCP or even KVM, where these are things that are not changing except for major versions once or twice a year, if that.
Yeah, I think that's really the challenge for both developers and customers with Kubernetes is trying to stay on that fast moving train and not get behind.
Yeah, and it is fast.
And if you do get behind, then you just get farther and farther behind because it becomes more difficult.
Yep. The hill gets bigger.
Oh, yes,
Cool.
It does. Let's see. IBM did speak about handling a very large number of charts and what they're doing in their CI and review processes. They did actually have slides, but the in-presence video is way better than the slides for this case, so I'm hoping that the CNCF will get all of the videos posted soon. I'm not sure why it's taken 3 weeks. They also use some amount of CubeVal and schema validation, but they've also added a metadata file that is somewhat proprietary. It's not really proprietary. It's open, but like it's not implemented by a lot of vendors. So we don't specifically need to care about that. It's more about IKS and their indexing service. Replicated. Anybody familiar with Replicated at all and what they do?
For the recording one, yeah.
Okay.
Quick shout.
So yeah, I was going to do it eventually. I'm just waiting to see if anybody else could describe it besides me. So Replicated effectively has a way to ship a Kubernetes containerized application as an appliance, right? So you build everything out and then they help you actually produce that as a black box item, right? They do other things throughout the ecosystem though that are specifically trying to help people that are doing maintenance and actual infrastructure and things like this. They spoke about doing day 2 operations, especially using Helm with Kubernetes. And in that, they talked about ship and COTS. Now, their GitHub has COTS, ship, curl, that's curl with a K, and unfork. It also has customize. Now, for those of us working with Kubernetes on a daily basis, Customize was actually integrated directly in 1.14. What Customize allows you to do is to take other YAML and basically add in patch files that will be passed as a secondary. So you take your YAML, you do apply with Customize, and you give it the tac F, whatever your YAML is, and then you give it the Customize file, and it will actually patch your input on the way through, so it deploys the final result of that. COTS takes that and blends that with Helm. Unfork is a way to have the modifications from your Helm output treated as customized output, so then you can say COTS deploy, here's the Helm chart, here's my customize on the output, just pass it straight through. unfork then also gives you a way to carry those changes forward. It's basically doing revisional patch sets, right? So it's working in such a way that as you go and an upstream makes a change, it will do the fuzzing to see if your patch still applies and let you know ahead of time if you need to change it for these newer versions. This is super handy for certain people. It could be that way for our own infrastructure team that sometimes wants to do things a little differently. It's extremely handy for those folks that are using entirely tillerless, and I say that entirely tillerless, meaning not the tiller free via local tiller, but instead are doing Helm template and taking the template, running it through customize, checking into a repository, and then using Terraform to deploy it. We have a few customers doing this. Our own infrastructure is doing this. It could be very, very handy for those use cases. Let's see. My own talk on the charts, I can dig out the slides. My CPU is going to die if I try to do that right now. That specifically was actually well attended for the size of the crowd that we actually had, and apparently raised a bunch of eyebrows in terms of the scale of what we're actually working with and why we have to do things in such a complex manner. This actually was interesting, and I'll come to that later, because there was another Hickey that actually gave a talk specifically talking about dry patterns and library charts when it comes to Helm 3. He and I had a conversation. It wasn't very long because unfortunately we had other things we had to get to. I'm going to try and reach out to him and get more conversation going in terms of what we can do Helm 2 versus Helm 3 and some sort of equal maintenance between the two. The response from everybody was, one, everybody agrees that our chart is one of the easiest charts to use because we have everything fully included, and it's also as pliable as everybody could possibly need it to be. We had customers there using it. We had customers there looking to switch to it. And we had customers of not an insignificant size who had been using it for months, if not longer. Before I go jumping down to anything else, please chime in.
Give us just a quick mini history on how long we've had our chart, our chart in its current form out.
In its current form. That's funny. I say that with a little bit of sarcasm because we evolve super fast. Our current form, as it is, probably was late beta, which was October of last year. I think GA was, what, November, DJ?
No, I think GA was maybe September.
Oh, wow. So yeah, the beta would have been like July and August. Yeah.
So yeah, 1.0 I think is about a year old now.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah, time flies. So the initial version that we started when we were doing alpha, that we were doing the work over the winter of, well, the Northern Hemisphere winter of 2017 to 2018. That was definitely a highly revisional. Things were changing very rapidly. We knew this. It was alpha. We warned everybody. When we got into beta, we had pretty much finalized the structure and a lot of the little design decisions. And we were actually setting out all of the charts and configuration and getting some of our larger patterns put into place. Once we hit GA, there have been some patterns that have changed since. But by the time GA hit around, we had init containers in process. We had refusal for any secure items in environments. A lot of the primary architectural decisions were in place. Since then, the biggest ones were the addition of the deprecations logic. We put that in place specifically to handle when we had to do major revisional changes to where the properties were located. Globalization, moving a property from a content to a secret, things like this. That was done explicitly to handle upgrade processes for people who could not be forewarned about that unless they actually read that release note. And we know that people read release notes, but it's the people that don't read release notes that cause all kinds of pain, both for themselves and for the support people that have to figure out what did you do and what did we miss in between because of a lack of communication or a lack of reading. That has actually protected not only us, but many customers along the way. And they've actually been really surprised that the Helm chart will go, nope, stop. You can't go any farther because you need to move this. Because other charts have had upgrade problems where if you make a change like that, the only time you make a change like that is a major version. We have iterated a major version twice, GA and 2.0, and that's it, right? 2.0 was actually the 12-point revision set, and we had a major change in terms of how the database is handled in that frame. If we didn't have the deprecations logic, anytime an upgrade was done, you had the risk of breaking a property or a location or any number of things that we've seen through other charts in the community. And I say that because even Cert Manager hit this. And if they had a deprecation logic, they would have been able to warn people when they did the upgrade that, oh, by the way, between this version and this version, if you happen to have installed the version in between, when you do the upgrade to the next version, you're going to delete all your certificates and start over. Right? That would have been great for them to have at the time. And then after that is check config. And that's only been in place for the last 4 months. And it's basically designed to be the same thing as deprecation logic, except to warn you when we see that you've knowingly done something wrong. We don't feel that anybody's done anything wrong intentionally, but if we know that you tried to turn on Redis and Redis HA, just don't even try to deploy, because we can't tell you who's going to win in that fight. You know, if you try to install Cert Manager, but you've told it to use self-signed certificates, what's going on? You know, things like this.
Gotcha. Those are great examples.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump straight over Kubernetes days. While this was really good, I've got some notes in there. Helm 3. I've linked a good article on some first looks at what's going on in terms of Helm 3. It's in beta, currently on beta 3. They haven't talked about beta 3, but it's been out for the better part of this month. 3.0, it was decided, will not include Lua. That's important because that's a big differentiating factor between 2.0 and 3.0, is the ability to have an actual scripting language as a part of the system. They decided to rather get their SDK 100% before they add the ability to do scripting, so that you don't have to worry about, did something funky happen because we installed scripting and now somebody's relying on a feature that we don't want them to be relying on. They have officially made the release history stored as secrets the default now, instead of a config map. In 2.0, later 2.0, you could actually say store them in secrets instead, but you had to pass additional flags. Another point is that namespaces are now super important because there is no expectation of a global. You can now have a MariaDB release in one namespace and a MariaDB release in another namespace, because Helm 3 uses the kube control context that is active. There's no tiller, there's no RBAC. If you can do it, Helm can do it. If you can't do it, Helm can't do it, right? There are flags so that you can have multiple contexts set up for yourself. So for example, you can have your administrator context and your developer context and your namespace context. And depending on which context you've told it to use, Helm will or will not be able to do things. To install a CRD, you have to have cluster rights. To install an application, you don't. So why? And last but not least is that library charts. They will be useful for us, but we still have to be careful about override behaviors because templates are global. They're all compiled together in one swath, and then whoever came first wins. This is important because we rely on that feature to be able to override the downstream requirements so that when we set the PostgreSQL secret name, PostgreSQL actually uses it. Otherwise, we have to rely on whatever their template is, and then we have to try and include it and make sure that we can control it, but you can't when you're using multi-layer charts as we are. So this is super important that while we do want to test out library charts, we definitely want to test the behavior of them. As I said, we can go back and look at the library charts as a potential for Helm 2.0. This is something interesting that our not related Martin Hickey pointed out from IBM, specifically to our Gerard Hickey raised an issue about splitting the charts into individual repositories. It can technically be done, apparently, in Helm 2 to have what they call a common chart. It faces the same problem. And it does have an issue where if you try to install that for whatever reason and you're not consuming it by something else, you will end up in a really weird / broken state from Helm. If you try to install it, it's almost impossible to remove. If it does install anything, you don't know what's going to happen to those results in the end. So it's still kind of dangerous in Helm 2, but it still comes back to the same concern of order of operations and who gets loaded first. I did link the slides and the presentation that was from Martin from IBM. It is valuable. I really hope that we get to see this video soon. In our existing discussion regarding splitting of this, it has basically been that the nature of the way these are deployed is a bit of a problem. That may be true. It may no longer be true. We can reevaluate after we've all had a chance to look into what a common chart pattern is. We're at about end of planned time. Anybody want to ask questions? I do have other notes that I can pull in, and Stephen and I have discussed a couple times in the past, so have at.
I think I've asked most of the questions that I had during the call. I'm not sure if the other folks have questions.
Okay. Is your talk posted online already?
I have the slides. I don't have the video.
Okay. You know that's like 2 weeks out or something?
I wish I knew. My email as the speaker said, they will be posted to our YouTube channel.
So we haven't seen any Helm, anything from that summit posted yet. Is that right?
I've seen no videos related to Helm Summit 2019 posted yet, and I've been searching daily.
Understood. Yeah. So when they're ready, we'll give a shout to the team, make sure folks get a chance to look at it.
Yes.
I'm pretty excited. I think the way we have approached the summer and kind of where the knowledge that we have now, I'm glad we didn't pull the trigger on some of the things we were thinking about, particularly with sort of refactoring the operator. It feels like there's a lot of knowledge now that we wouldn't have had if we had done it 2-3 months ago. So I really appreciate Jason going and kind of beating the bushes and trying to find things that specifically apply to us, so we can go ahead and iterate, right? Get that stuff into the product.
Right. I think we really do, DJ, please. We really do have a good idea of where we need to go with the operator and some of the changes that need to be made for our long-term manageability of the product, as well as every single instance individually.
Yeah, I would agree. We had that great talk last week where we kind of got on the same page there. I think we have a pretty solid vision for the future of the operator at the moment.
And that comes from us having been to Barcelona and talking to folks there at KubeCon in the EU. having gone to Helm Summit and bumped into Red Hat again and talked with them several times. And when I say several times, I mean I had 4 separate conversations with them regarding the operators and what we're doing, what they're doing, and how the two can anyway align. We really do have a better idea of what's needed, and the community has better defined what it means to have a service operator versus an instance operator versus a actual version operator. And we're still that edge case where we're managing an entire application suite. Everybody else is managing an application component, right? You have an operator for Postgres, an operator for Redis, an operator for Prometheus. Nobody else has an application suite where they have to care about the Postgres and the Redis and the backing store and the application nodes and the background jobs. Like, they just don't do things as complicated as we do. That's not a knock on anybody else. They have very specific concerns. And there is an argument to be made about separation of concerns. But as our infrastructure folks will tell you, you still have to understand the whole impact of what you're doing, especially when you have something as complex as we do. Okay, so we're about time. I'm going to wrap down pretty quick. As I said, I have met multiple customers in the last couple of weeks that are using our charts or are in the process of migrating to our charts. Some of them small, some of them paying, some of them large. At commit, this one I want to bring up, is we actually had a couple of the fellows from Northwestern Mutual present and actually gave a presentation on their work with Kubernetes and GitLab in Kubernetes. They are very much looking forward to getting everything rolled into our official charts, because they actually were doing omnibus-based charts, DJ, like 6 months before we started getting near it. So they've found the road bumps we found. We've just managed to do a lot of the work they would have eventually had to do for them. And they're very, very happy to see that and looking forward to getting into using our official charts instead. So that pretty much covers that. For anyone interested, I will be going to KubeCon in San Diego this year. You may see a few other members of the distribution team, and you will see people from our engineering and solutions architects and et cetera teams as well. Okay, well, thanks everybody. I haven't seen any issues pop up or further discussions in the notes, so I will say have a good Friday.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks. You too.